password on this. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for those of you who are here. Welcome to the June Salon. I know it's been a little while since we had one. I'm very glad you're here, and I'm excited to be doing one. And I'm so thankful for Lilian Sue to be with us. Lilian Sue is with In Retrospect Writing Services, and she is an educational speaker, publicist, PR coach, and an author as well. And she has some new projects coming up, and she is going to be talking to us today about imposter syndrome. And I want to say, even though some of us may be seasoned authors, doesn't matter. Imposter syndrome can rear its ugly head your entire career. So whatever she has to say, I promise at some point you're going to be comparing yourself to another author. You're going to be doing something that this advice can come in helpful and handy for you. Thank you, Lilian Sue, for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find you, and then go ahead and let us know all about imposter syndrome and how we can combat it.
Thanks for the great introduction, Heather, and thanks again for having me, everyone. My name is Lilian. I'm a PR coach and publicist who works with authors to empower them to push past limiting beliefs like fear, like anxiety, and like the imposter syndrome we're going to be talking about in a little bit here, in order to gain the confidence to learn how to build and launch successful PR campaigns that will meet your goals. So the way I do that is through one-on-one coaching sessions, my campaign services, workshops, and webinars just like this. And I'm also working on releasing my first nonfiction PR book, which we can talk a little bit more towards the end there, that will focus a lot on building a strong marketing and PR mindset. And it covers things like imposter syndrome. So what I'm going to do right now is just share my presentation with you so that you can follow along a little bit easier. So for today, as I just mentioned in my intro around myself, I talk to clients a lot about how to push past limiting beliefs like fear, anxiety, imposter syndrome, and we figure out why you're feeling this way, what's triggering that, and how to recognize what's triggering it so you can move past it. So for today, we're going to be focusing on imposter syndrome specifically. So with this presentation, what I'm going to do is kind of outline what imposter syndrome looks like, what can trigger it, and how imposter syndrome can present itself in terms of your line of thinking, your actions, your subconscious thoughts. And then we're going to dive a little bit into 3 different ways that I use myself, and I also coach my clients on a daily basis to push past it. So let's start with what imposter syndrome is. It's a very, very common form of self-doubt and a limiting belief that can influence your subconscious thoughts, your beliefs about yourself as an author and your books. And it most importantly has an impact on whether or not you choose to take action to move forward on things like writing your book, on things like marketing your book, on things like getting out there and building relationships and sharing your story with others. And it can present itself in things like your train of thought. Thoughts like, why am I doing this? I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone's going to look at me and know that I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm a fraud. I only got here because of luck. Imposter syndrome is a very common form of self-doubt that presents itself in where you are unable to accept your own success. Whatever outward success you've had, you're unable to accept it because you believe you only got here because you got lucky. So in general, that's kind of the spiral of thoughts that you have when imposter syndrome hits. So it's a very deep combination of anxiety and fear. As I said, it's self-doubt. It is fearing that you're going to be judged. It's being anxious on how you're going to be accepted or taken in by readers, by publishers, by other audience members. And it's also fearing that rejection because they're going to realize, hey, this person doesn't know what they're doing. And that's not what the audience is thinking. But when you're deep in the middle of imposter syndrome, that can be what you as an author is thinking. So these are some of the common ways and thoughts in the way that it presents itself. And in the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what can trigger these types of thoughts in you that can be really common. So imposter syndrome can be triggered by a number of different situations for you as an author. Writer's block is a really big one because you could be developing a fantastic story. You're making great headway in developing your characters or in a particular sequence, and then all of a sudden everything stops. And that could really trigger your imposter syndrome because you're thinking, maybe I don't actually have this story planned out. Maybe my outline's all wrong. Maybe I'm just getting lucky in terms of how these characters came to me. Maybe it just came to me in a dream. Another really big one that can trigger imposter syndrome is comparison syndrome to others' milestones. And we see this all the time, particularly on social media, because when you're following other authors and other writers, what you're seeing is the results of the work they've put in. So if they're publishing the book faster than you think you should be publishing the book, if they are booking book signings, doing festivals, getting panel events and workshops where they're actually talking to readers directly who want to learn from them, if they're being interviewed, it could be really triggering imposter syndrome and comparison syndrome in you, where you sit there and you think to yourself, I should get that. I should be there already. The reason why I'm not is because I don't know what I'm doing. Couple of other ways that can trigger imposter syndrome in you are things like feeling pressured to succeed due to external forces. And what I mean by that is, for a lot of us who were maybe raised in environments where you had very high expectations placed on you in terms of your career, in terms of your finances, you might feel extra pressure to succeed because of the way you were brought up, because of some of the other relationships that you have in your life. And that can also play into comparison syndrome on a personal level as well. If you are within relationships where you find yourself being compared to the success of other people quite a bit, that's another way to trigger imposter syndrome. And finally, sometimes being in a group where it's great in the way that it can hold you accountable to your goals, you can support each other and provide resources to each other. But sometimes when you see other members of the group achieving milestones like getting published, like getting their editing done, like getting their first interview, you can feel like you don't belong because you're not also making those same milestones at the same time. So now that you have an idea of what imposter syndrome is, how it presents itself, and the different ways that you can get triggered to feel it, how is that going to prevent you or hold you back from promoting your book, from getting out there to share your story and to build those relationships to share your story by getting in front of the right audiences. So what I mean by that is learning how to build relationships with key bloggers, freelance writers, reviewers, podcasters that support authors in your genre, that support books in your genre. If you're feeling that imposter syndrome come up, how is it going to stop you from moving forward with that? Well, it can present itself as a way of believing in a bunch of myths. Like when you believe that your story's not worthy of being shared, you don't know what you're doing, you feel like a fraud, you could believe in popular PR myths, just like the couple I've had on here. So things like, I don't know what I'm doing, therefore there's no possible way I could present my story to someone else and have them believe in me to want to interview me, to believe in my story, to want to support my story. Things like if you are afraid and stressed out about being judged on, what your story is and how you're presenting yourself, or that, you're comparing yourself to someone else's success. It's like, well, that person knows what they're doing. I don't have the audiences that they do or the money that they do to put myself and my story in front of the right audiences to get in front of readers. Therefore, PR is not going to work for me. Or things like my story's not worthy of being shared. Therefore, even if I do try to send that email out or try to connect with a podcast or try to connect with a writer, it's not going to get me in front of the audiences that I need, because automatically you believe these people are going to say no to you. So this is how imposter syndrome can hold you back from wanting to share your story, from wanting to get in front of audiences to talk about your book, and from wanting to build these relationships with these key outlets and podcasts and writers and reviewers that are going to get you in front of readers that trust these platforms, who will then be enticed and trust in your book and in you as an author. So how are you supposed to move past that? You are stuck in the middle of feeling like a fraud. You're feeling like you're not worthy. You're feeling like you don't know what it is that you're doing, and therefore that means no one's going to support you. So how are you going to get out of that? Method number one is focus on the facts. Because whether you're writing your first book or your 100th, the fear that you don't know what you're doing can really stop you and can cause you to spiral. So by focusing on the facts of how far you've come, so looking at, how many words have you gotten in your current story? When you do share with other authors, what are some of the things that they've said about your writing that they enjoy? What about beta readers for some of your books? Or if you're working with a critique partner, what are some of the things that they've said? These are the facts that can help you illustrate your progress up until this point. And what can make that more impactful is if you print out what some of these folks have said and have cheered you on in your progress, and frame it on your wall, stick it on your wall somewhere where you can always reinforce every time you think, just because this is my third book doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. Remember your own history. Put those milestones up on the wall so you can always refer back to them and remember that you do have an audience that is already cheering you on, and you have made progress because you have released this many books, written this many words, and proven to yourself that you do have an audience. Method number two, this is one that I coach my clients on through my coaching sessions, and one that I use on pretty much almost a daily basis. And I create my own mindset mantras to get myself back on track, to push past these limiting beliefs every time they come up. So I repeat things to myself like, I'm making progress writing the book. Maybe it won't be done in a week, but every word, every bit of progress is worth something because I'm still taking those small incremental steps to walk in the right direction to finishing this project. Reinforcing what I mentioned in the first method about referring to the facts. Always repeat to yourself, my story is worthy of being promoted and being shared because I already have an audience that tells me they love me and they love my book and they support that from me. Another one that you could use would be, when it comes to promoting your book, this process is a marathon, not a sprint. But every time I reach out to someone, even if I don't hear back right away, I'm making the progress in a way that I can control to get my story out there in front of the right people. I am taking the steps that I need in order to push forward and to build those relationships I want to build in order to get in front of the right readers. So these are just some of the mantras that I use with clients all the time, that I repeat to myself all the time when I'm working on projects. And it really does help to reinforce on a daily basis that incremental progress is what's important. You don't need to sprint to the finish line in order to feel accomplished, feel satisfied, and to make an impact. And on top of that, remind yourself that when you have these moments of insecurity, that you are in fact more accomplished than you think because you are moving forward. So method number 3, this is another thing that I do a lot when it comes to battling with imposter syndrome, anxiety, with fear, is allow yourself to sit with it for a little bit. Acknowledge it when it hits and then let it go. And how you acknowledge it is by asking yourself, is there something that's actually happening that's making me feel this way right now? Is there something that has happened that's making me doubt? Did I get a rejection from a media pitch? Did I get a rejection from an agent? Did I get a rejection from a publisher? Is there something that's really at work here that's causing my self-doubt? Is there something that's causing me to feel this way? And when you get to the bottom of what actually is causing you to feel this way, the more you'll realize that the way you're feeling is valid, but you don't have the facts to back it up. Because even if you did have a rejection from a media outlet, from an agent, from a publisher, you can sit there and say to yourself, but I am continuing to make progress on my books the way I want to make them by not forcing myself to write it, promote it, or finish it based on someone else's parameters. And on top of that, I always have my fellow authors, readers that I've met, and other people who are cheering me on. The key to this method of helping you let go of imposter syndrome is making sure that you give yourself time to sit with it and then ask yourself, okay, now that I've had some time to sit with this, how can I move forward in a way that aligns with the goals that I have. Because if you don't give yourself that time, what can happen is if you try to force yourself to take action while you're feeling this way, it can lead to a lot of self-sabotage, which could manifest in things like you end up writing a couple thousand words that you have to scrap because you're not happy with, because you forced yourself to do it when you weren't in a good place. It could lead to things like you are reaching out to the wrong people just to get an interview or just to get a review because you feel like you have to force yourself to get out there. The best way to let go of it is to acknowledge it, allow yourself to sit with it for a bit, and then let it go by saying, how can I move forward in a way that is aligned with my goals of finishing this book, of getting my story out there, of building key relationships with other writers, with readers, and media outlets that are going to help me get in front of the right readers by allowing me to borrow their platforms. So in covering what imposter syndrome is, how it presents itself, what can trigger it, what it looks like when it is stopping you from taking action, and covering a little bit on just 3 methods on how you can use these methods to help you move forward from it when you feel stuck in it and you feel like you can't take action. I hope I've given you just a little bit to think about in regards to looking at imposter syndrome a different way and sort of being able to recognize what triggers it so that you can build healthier coping mechanisms to learn how to push past it moving forward. So that's my presentation. If you have more questions about how to push past limiting beliefs, building healthy coping mechanisms to build strong and healthy PR and marketing mindsets, you can always follow me on Instagram at Lilian Sue, copywriter PR. I'm on Twitter as well at lsue23. You can find me at Lilian Sue on LinkedIn. My website is inretrospectwritingservices.com. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm also currently working on releasing my first nonfiction PR book. And inside this book, one of the main components in it is that I focus on why mindset is important to PR success, some of the limiting beliefs that can come up in addition to imposter syndrome, and how to take different methods and mantras in order to move past it, in order to learn how to build a strong strategy. So what I can do as we are going through questions and things like that, I can definitely pop the link to my book campaign in the chat, and you can take a look and let me know if you have any questions. But I think we can break for questions now.
I'm gonna start just by saying that was a very powerful bit of information packed very neatly into a package, and I think that it's something I could have benefited from 7, 8 years ago when I was telling myself, well, actually even longer ago. I actually wrote my first manuscript in let's see, I think I was 32, so 2002. I got rejections for that. Just even writing it, I kept telling myself, I don't have a degree, a literary degree. I didn't, learn how to write a novel. There are people out there who spend their whole lives writing novel. Like I kept telling myself I couldn't write the novel, and then I had to overcome that somehow. I mean, the resources for this kind of thing were not as available then. And eventually I overcame that roadblock and I wrote the manuscript, and then I got all the rejections, and I was like, oh, well, this is clearly crap. You know, I can't write at all because these people say they're not interested in representing me or whatever. So as far back as 20 years ago, I could have used this information. And part of the reason I started this group, probably the main reason, is because I want to provide resources to people, beginners, traditionally published, indie published, self-published, whatever, because I know what it feels like to feel like all of these levels of, because now I'm 3 books, I'm writing my 4th book now. And I still hit these moments of imposter syndrome. When I wrote my first romance, I was like, I'm in my 40s. I am plus size. Am I going to have to write plus size? Or like, I had all these things that just kept trying to stop me from writing. So I think that I can't be the only one dealing with that. And then to come in and help people with this resource like this is so important to me. And you've sort of nutshelled the whole imposter syndrome gamut. Like, you really nutshelled all the various kinds that you can have and how they're keeping you from being moving forward in your writing career. So I appreciate that. And I want to know what was your first imposter syndrome moment that you remember, and if you can remember it, and what made you go into the line of work here. And I have a feeling the two are connected somehow. And then maybe after you talk a little bit about that, I hope other people will have questions for you, because I'm glad to have you here. I hope that they have something that they can think of they want to ask you.
I love that question. It's actually a fantastic question, Heather. I'd say my first moment was probably when I started the coaching part of my business. And a lot of that imposter syndrome part of it came from the fact that it's not done in my industry. Most of the, when you talk to a publicist or a PR agency, most of my industry is focused on hands-on doing it for their clients. That's something that I still do. But for me, the reason why I wanted to get into coaching was because I saw a lot of the same limiting beliefs and unrealistic expectations from clients that would come to me and come to the agencies that I worked with, who, expected guaranteed results from their campaigns, who, would walk into a campaign and be so scared about spending time, energy, and money to get their story out there. Now, I'd be the first person to tell you this is a myth for a lot of writers out there who seem to believe that you need millions of followers and $20,000 a campaign to make it work. That's false. You don't need millions of followers. In fact, I would argue you are much better served with a smaller, engaged, dedicated audience that will champion you, that will cheer you on. That's much more powerful. And then when it comes to the budget part of it, it always comes down to, how do you want to start? And that comes down to your goals, right? That comes down to, are we looking at genre-specific podcasts? Are we doing local? Are we going national? Are we going international? And the length of time, because I have clients that do 2-month campaigns. I have clients that do 4 months. There's some folks that have gone 6 to 8 months, depending on what their goals are. So all of these things played into my clients having a lot of limiting beliefs. So instead of focusing on moving forward with their campaigns, so much of what I was doing as a service provider was trying to help them through these spirals. And sometimes it wouldn't work. Sometimes it would end up as, you know what, I signed on too soon, right? So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to coach people on it, because it is key to moving forward. Like, if you don't have a solid mindset, you're not going to want to go plan. You're not going to want to build a strategy. All you're going to want to do is like be fixated on putting your energy and your time towards, where's my money going? as opposed to who do I actually want to talk to? What's a book festival out there I want to be featured in? What's a podcast I want to be featured on? How am I going to put together signing events for the readers out there, right? Instead of thinking about that, you're thinking about where the money's going. So as a coach, when I first started this, the imposter syndrome came because there was really nobody doing it. And to be honest with you, even now, there still is nobody doing it the way I'm doing it for authors and creative entrepreneurs. So I kind of
wearing it with PR the way you are.
So I had to kind of go, what am I doing? Like, I don't have a benchmark, a blueprint, someone else's plan to work off of. And it kind of came to the point, and in writing my book, there was some of that too, because most of the PR books in the market cater to your big companies, cater to other publicists who are doing government relations, crisis communication, all of that kind of stuff. There's nothing out there that helps close the gap for creative entrepreneurs, authors, small business. So I had to take a step back and go, like, I'm not following anybody here. Like, how am I supposed to know what I'm doing? And I finally sat down and I said, hey, I've been doing PR a long time. I know I have the knowledge. I know I have the expertise. I'm going to share it in ways that resonate with people based on what they tell me. So in doing the reach outs, in incorporating my audience, and even being as simple as asking them, hey, what do you guys want to see? What questions do you have? It's really informed how I go out there and add value on a daily basis.
It sounds like you're sort of customizing the PR and coaching pieces together based on the person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the other thing that I had heard from a lot of authors and entrepreneurs who had maybe taken a webinar like this or done a workshop, they'd come out of it and they said to me, I learned some fantastic information. My problem is I don't know how to take that and move forward with it specific to what it is that I'm actually working on. And that's something that I focus on all the time with my clients, because the general framework of setting up a campaign is the same, but within that framework, you're going to have so many specific things to, like, an author who's writing a memoir is going to go after different opportunities, different interviews, different workshops, different festivals than a writer who's doing a romance book. Right. So you cannot approach both those things or authors and those genres exactly the same way. So for me, is really about drilling down to the bedrock of how do I add value to an individual author in ways that they're going to understand, that's going to speak to everybody, and then through coaching, help them through what they're specifically dealing with. Like with coaching, most of it is on figuring out how to help them build and launch a campaign, everything from brainstorming story pitches to putting together a media kit to putting together the media list of the people that they actually want to have interviews with, like, have them interview them or do events with and things like that. But sometimes I have clients that are like, I'm really struggling on the social media side of it too. Is that something that you can help me, put together? And I said, absolutely, because it's all connected. PR, every time you have a review, every time you have a video from your event go live, that is high quality content created by a credible, trustworthy third-party platform on your behalf that you didn't have to create for yourself, that you can then use as part of your social media content strategy.
Right. And
right?
Linda has a question that I think I can answer.
Mhm.
Should we pay to be on podcasts and review and get reviews? I keep getting offers from people who guarantee audiences reviews for dollars. I'm going to say, from my perspective, the answers to both of those is no. Unless you're advertising on a podcast, you should not be paying to be a guest on a podcast. That is my experience. And as far as reviews, never pay for a review. You could pay for
No.
book tours,
Yeah.
and some of those people do book tours, but did you have some insight on that, Lilian?
Absolutely. If you are paying to like sponsor an episode of a podcast, different story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
that is a, paid advertising, sponsored advertising opportunity that will get you and your books in front of other people, but they are transparent about that, right?
Yeah, and exactly.
You don't want to be paying for reviews because not only does that get you in trouble with Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
and
Big
you can
trouble.
get delisted and things like that. What it lacks is authenticity and honesty. If you start paying too much for this kind of returns with reviews and interviews and stuff, it's going to tell their audience and tell your audience that it's not a genuine relationship. It's not honest, it's not authentic. You're not earning that media coverage and really building that relationship. I don't think, anyone who comes to you, and there's a lot of people that will send you DMs that say, we can feature you in Forbes, we can feature you in these other areas if you pay a certain fee. The other problem I have with it is, what is it actually worth? Because they're not just featuring you on those things, they are featuring you in a list of people. So just because you have your name in on there and you can say on your website as featured in Forbes or Entrepreneur or wherever, is that actually going to pay dividends for your career as an author and with your readers?
Yeah, and I would
I don't.
caveat it with saying that the only place I would pay for a review is Kirkus Reviews.
Yes, Kirkus and Publishers Weekly can help.
Publishers Weekly, yes.
Yeah, in regards to, if your goals, for example, is to build a reputation as a thought leader where you are doing a lot more presentations, you're doing the workshops, you're doing conferences, you're doing keynotes for major conferences and things like that, having those larger names in your Rolodex and having some really key review quotes from them can really, really help you out there. But it helps you out for that specific purpose. Your
Right.
average reader is
Right.
not going to care as much about Kirkus or Publishers Weekly. So it's really about figuring out what your goals are. But certainly, I wouldn't pay for anything like that unless you are doing a sponsorship for a podcast that has a lot of their listeners are in your key audience, and you have the budget and you want to do that type of reach out. So
if it's a romance podcast and you write romance, then you sponsoring part of the episode, they'll have a commercial of some kind. That is totally fine to pay for. In fact, it's great if you can afford it, I think.
Oh yeah.
If somebody invites you to be on their podcast to talk to them as an interviewee, no, you do not.
No, and you shouldn't have to. I know that there are podcasts out there that specifically cater to 6 and 7 figure business experts and stuff like that that tend to charge. My feeling is that there are so many podcasts out there that can fit your genre, that support authors, and that can support you even on the business side as an entrepreneur, that you don't need to pay for. So you're much better served in building relationships with those platforms and the people that run those platforms.
Pamela is saying that she never felt the imposter syndrome. Let's see, let me read this out loud because it's a little long. Maybe I'm an anomaly, but I've never felt like an imposter. Even when I had an agent say that she didn't feel strong, her word, about my manuscript, I felt she was wrong. I put the manuscript aside. Whoops, I went too far. For decades, and actually wrote another one. So my books are out of order in the order they were written. My Achilles heel is that I become frustrated with technology because it's not always easy for me to navigate, for example, different platforms. That's wonderful, Pamela. And I think that you've mastered something that I wanted to say that Lilian touched on. I don't know. I'm pointing to you because in my view, you're to my left. I have no idea where you are. I feel like the Brady Bunch here. Anyway, Lilian did touch on this as well, which is how you feel about your work is going to kind of, I don't even remember exactly your wording, but the way you feel about your work is going to kind of come through in the marketing aspect. So I had somebody one time say that if you're not really proud of your book and you're putting it out there with this low-key embarrassment, I guess, it's going to read that way. And I think that in that way, Pamela, you've overcome a hurdle that many of us have to. I was not proud. I was proud I wrote a book. I was proud I had a story. I was glad but when it came to people actually putting it out there and talking about it, I was very shy about it and very embarrassed. And there's certain aspects of the book I'm like, I want to crawl under a table when people read it out. It's not because I'm ashamed of the book, but because I'm so uncertain of its goodness or whatever, how well it's written, that at the time I could not. Now I'm like, I'm republishing it. I feel really good about everything that's in it. I've got it the way I want it. And I think that somebody like Pamela is not going to have to overcome that hurdle. Do you find that there are people that you deal with that don't have some of these aspects that they have to deal with, but do have others?
Yeah, I've definitely spoken and worked with authors who have like pretty clear cut like beliefs and stuff in terms of like what their goals are and what they're willing to do in regards to sharing their story, building the relationships, promoting their book. But where they kind of struggle is figuring out the best ways to do that. Right? Sometimes where their limiting beliefs lie is more of on the unrealistic expectations side. I mean, Heather, I've lost track of how many people have come to me and said, hey, I have no media experience whatsoever, but I want to be a media mogul. So can you get me on Jimmy Fallon? So yeah, like my answer to them is like, that's great. But that's
a good
not
goal.
Right. But like, to go from 0 to 1,000 is not how it works, because if you have no experience and you don't know how to manage yourself in that kind of setting, the last thing you want to do is to be on the couch in front of, the in-studio audience, not to mention millions of people at home, and to make a mistake. Because if that happens, it's a lot harder for you to recover from. So a lot of it too is when you're building these kinds of campaigns and you're learning these different platforms, and I can definitely understand some of the resistance to trying to figure out these different platforms because you only have a limited time, like amount of time and energy to put towards it. And of course, things like social media marketing and PR, email marketing, all of that stuff is not your day job. This is not what you're building a business on. I can totally understand that. But the key to doing any of this kind of thing is, even if you're looking to work with somebody on it, the reason why I focus so much on mindset in my work and in my book and everything is because I want to make sure that every author knows how to advocate for themselves better when it comes to working with these professionals, so that you have an idea of how each platform works, and you have an idea, most importantly, of what you want to do with them in order to tell your social media manager, your publicist, your PR agency that this is where you want to head with it. Because at the end of the day, it's your book, your reputation, and your author's journey, your story that is on the line. no contractor, no good contractor is going to move forward with any of that stuff, with publicizing any of it without your input. So, I always advocate for authors to have at least a better understanding of what it is they want to do, at least, because I've talked to a lot of authors, some of whom have gone through PR campaigns, come out the other side and said, yeah, I got results. They weren't the results I wanted, though, because I didn't feel comfortable telling the publicist that I would rather focus on a different area because I believed that they were the expert, and therefore we just went with their recommendations, where, on the publicist side, they're just going to go with their instincts if you don't tell them anything, which means you're not building a tailored campaign that's going to be focusing on achieving your goals and where you want to take your book, right? So, Pamela's point, I think it's fantastic that, imposter syndrome isn't something that you necessarily feel. But in regards to, why, like you had mentioned before, that you had put aside that manuscript for a couple of decades after hearing back from that agent. If you don't mind me asking, was there a particular reason why you put it aside? I'm assuming it's not because of what the agent said, but you had other reasons to sort of give that book a breather.
That was Pamela. Pamela, are you going to type, or would you like to unmute and tell her? She might be typing.
I forgot about unmuting. I was typing it. And frankly, she made me angry. So I put it to the side because back in those days, prehistoric days, it was hard you couldn't self-publish like you can now. So
Right.
I just went on and started writing something else, but it made me mad because it was vague. It was vague to me. It was like, I don't feel that strong about it. Strong about what? I mean, she didn't really, say what it was she didn't feel strong about. I mean, maybe the entire book, but she didn't really say that either. So it just made me angry.
So it took you a while to cool off.
Yeah, I mean, like, I won't say how many years, but like I said, decades. But anger sometimes just does the opposite for me. Instead of like just not doing it, I'll do it. I'll just kind of do it even more, I guess you would say. But I've written since I was like a kid. So I always felt like, even though I had a day job, and even though I felt like, how people say starving artists, that I may not be able to make a living with it, it's always been a part of my life. So I kind of felt like she was wrong because, writing is a part of my life.
Great. Well, I'm glad that you kept pushing forward. It's if there's anything message I would like to get across during these salons, all of them, is that your work matters, whether or not you manage to ever get traction with a lot of sales, or if you're fine with 5 sales or just publishing and keeping it for yourself, that it matters to get your projects out there into the world, and that to get them out of yourself so that you can accomplish it. That's also important. And then you have people like Lilian Sue here, who can help you navigate some of the most difficult part, because as writers, most of us just want to be writing. We don't want to be doing, and especially as indie published, although a lot of traditionally published people have to do their own PR work these days. So a lot of us just want to be writing. And if you can get the help of somebody and cut the time down from all the time you would have to learn that, And even like, it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lilian, it sounds like you have a variety of ways that you can do it, that you could, somebody could invest a certain amount of money and do some of the legwork and stuff themselves and learn on their own. And then other people can just put a bigger amount of money and have you help them with more of the work, so that, of course, money is always going to, I think one of the unrealistic things that people deal with in independent publishing, self-publishing, is they think it's not going to cost them much or any money. And I will say some people have made a cover on Canva and never had their book edited, and they put it out there in the world. Okay, I mean, that is basically free work that you've done, but it is unlikely that's ever going to catch a lot of traction. You're probably never going to make a full-time career as an author if you do that constantly, if that's all you ever do, because you really do need to get your stuff edited. You really do need to know who to target to market your stuff. I have published 7 or 8 years now, and I am only just learning some of the most important ways of listing on Amazon, the ways to list subtitles, the ways to do things so that your book is more visible. And that is taken me, that's how long it took me. I mean, who knows how long it will take you if you have a partner supporting you and paying for your rent and your food, and you can, and they say go right, you may have it may take you a lot shorter amount of time, or if you have some money you can invest but not a lot of time, you can have somebody like Lilian help you get over those rough spots. And we do have a lot of resources within the Salon network, and just other authors that you can ask questions in the group as well. If you just need a little pep talk, you can have a coach, or you can, just I'm having a horrible day and keep it at that. But if you get to the point in your career where you need a PR person, or you need somebody to help coach you, this exists. People like Lilian exist, and if you can, you should take advantage of that. And and today she's been generous with her time and giving us this information today as a volunteer, and we really appreciate that. I do want to mention one thing that Linda said that I thought was really cool when you were talking earlier on. She has traditionally published 14 books, but she still struggles with the comparison syndrome. So we know that still happens. I know I still deal. I have to physically make myself stop looking. I'm like, okay, it doesn't matter. I have to do what I can do. And then she said something else too about framing her first. Oh, I put my first check for an article in a frame. After 2 months, I thought I should cash it. Copied it and put the frame back up on the wall. A visual reminder of success is important. This was during your presentation. It reminded her of one of your tips for getting over is your goal counting, I believe, is the portion that she shared that with. And I think that's a great way to count a goal. I think I love it. I think that's a good visual reminder, like printing a quote or whatever. So yeah, Tony, I'm the same way. Don't tell me I can't do something. It just makes me want to do it more. Does anybody else have a question? If you unmute, we can have people take turns asking questions if you have anything else regarding imposter syndrome, PR. Linda, go ahead.
Chat, please. That would be helpful.
I can hear you. No, yeah, go ahead and say your question.
No, I said if you could put, Lilian, if you could put your links in the chat.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Great. Yeah, she will
be helpful. Thank you.
I
just wanted to also touch upon a point that Linda had made earlier about trying a bunch of different platforms and everything. It can definitely be attractive to try out different platforms because you see a lot of other people do that. The problem with that, though, is, and what I always say is that, is your audience actually going to be on there, right? So whether or not that platform is worth your time and energy, it's really about figuring out how to research it to see whether or not there are enough people on there that are going to actually make an impact with your goals? Like, is that actually where your audience is spending their time? And Heather, you had mentioned earlier about probably wanting to utilize LinkedIn a bit more because that's where a lot of the businesses are, and, you know, corporate and stuff. Like if you're looking for sponsors for the book festival and everything, like that's where you would go for places like that, right? So depending on what your goals are, who your audience is can always change, and where your audience is spending that time will always change as well.
Yeah, there are ones that seem like they're like having a business card. Like you need a very basic website. You just need one. So or at least one of those link trees. And then you also probably should at least have a LinkedIn even if you don't visit it a lot, just because a lot of business people are going to go there first. Amy has a question. Amy's question is, what about people telling you your idea won't work? I listened and re-examined, but it led me to just not writing anything. Now I wonder if I should have just gone for it and worried about plausibility later. So my feeling on that, and when Lilian's done putting her links in, I would say don't listen to what people tell you should be writing. I think you should write whatever you want to write, and I think that there's a market out there for just about anything. But of course, there are caveats there, like probably you shouldn't be telling people how to help their gallbladder if you have no background. Like if you're writing nonfiction on how to help fix gallbladders if you have no gallbladder experience. But barring that, in terms of if it's a fantasy book and somebody's like, oh, that's just not realistic. Let me just say there are a lot of things in life that have happened in real life that are completely unplausible. And I don't think you should worry about plausibility. And if you are, that I would say that is also one of her forms of imposter syndrome she was talking about that keeps you from moving forward in your projects. It's a progress stopper to have somebody else's opinion like that stop you from writing a story. I think Lilian probably has some good feedback on this as well. From my perspective, Amy, write it. I don't care what the plausibility is. To me, that makes no difference.
It's also like the question in regards to, oh, it's not plausible. This reminds me of a lot of issues that I see authors in my network have in regards to querying and also approaching publishers themselves, right? So many of them say, you know, things like right to market, or that we can't market your book. And my viewpoint on that has always been, yeah, says who? To who? Because for all of these agents and these publishers that say that, every author that I follow and that I worked with are already building their own audiences for their books. Like you can't tell them that they have no audience for their books when they're already building that audience. So for the people that are telling you that your idea won't work, I think it's less about what your idea is and more about where they're coming from and why their perspective is flawed and why you shouldn't listen to it. I mean, if there was constructive criticism attached to something like that, where it's like, you know, well, maybe you're missing some more in-depth research in a certain area, that would be one thing. But for anybody to make a blanket statement on, you know, what you're doing is not going to work, my counter argument has always been, says who? Because there is a market for these kinds of things. And a lot of authors I work with and I speak to on a daily basis have found those markets. So don't let, you know, an agent or a publisher tell you any different. Just because they can't do it doesn't mean it can't be done.
And I want to just say, I was doing filing the other day and I came across my folder this thick of rejection letters. And that was 20 years ago. And since then, I have published 3 books. I'm getting ready to finish and publish a 4th book, and I have lots more. I'm going to die before I get to write all the books I have ideas for and notes for. So let me just say that I agree 100%, and I think that I think it sounds like Lillian and I are on the same page here. Don't let people, even if it's somebody's opinion you value, unless it's a hate-filled tirade, I just think that you should pursue it, if nothing else, for yourself. Even if you write it and you're like, okay, I got it out, I don't need to. Everything you write does not have to be some kind of marketing success. It doesn't have to be a bestseller. It doesn't even have to be an okay seller. If you have a story and you want to write it, I think that you should write it. And whatever, I don't know all this surroundings. There are all kinds of reasons a person might try to dissuade you. They're worried about you writing something that might embarrass them. They're if that's the case, and it's a partner or somebody you truly respect, use a pen name. And then you don't have to worry about it, and they don't have to worry about it. If like spicy authors a lot of times use pen names because their family's worried, or they're worried, or whatever. They could be any number. They could be jealous. They could not understand your concept. And I have to say, one thing that I don't know how many women you deal with, Lillian, but another reason I started this group and I started the Write Women Book Fest is because women writers don't get the same respect, especially if they're part-time writers, stay-at-home moms, or just stay at home, whatever. Like, if you just don't fit the idea of the working from home 100 or working wherever and writing all the time and publishing constantly, traditionally, so many people don't have the concept of you're a real writer, and that is disrespectful to me. I just think that Lillian's not going to treat you like you're not a real writer just because you have one book that you finished. I'm not going to treat you like you're not a real writer because you're a stay-at-home mom and it took you 4 years to write it while your kid was in daycare. You really have to think about who you surround yourself with in terms of, or who you share your project information with. I highly recommend any woman in this chat, any woman listening to this video recording, do not surround yourself with people who throw roadblocks up to you like that. Find women who have businesses or who are mentors, or if you can't afford it, a volunteer mentor, somebody that can help you at least get over that first step, that can help you feel like you matter, that you have a voice, that this is something that you can do, because you already have enough to work against. Working against people in your inner circle who are and maybe this was an outer circle, maybe this was an agent you sent the letter to and they're like, huh, this is not plausible at all. It doesn't matter. That's one person's opinion. I mean, it's just one person. So I hope, Amy, that you will move forward with maybe not that project, maybe it's soured for you now, a different project of some kind. If you have any other questions, please let us know. If you think of another question, I think it's okay if you want to email Lillian or myself and ask further questions. I think that's okay. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, I don't see any more. If you want to unmute, if you want to ask a question. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now, and I'm going to talk a smidge about what I do. I'm Heather Brooks. I am the founder of the Write Women Book Festival, and I founded the group, the Write Women Network. I try to put together little events like this that help encourage women authors to, at any stage of their career, to continue to write, to continue to publish, to find the right resources that they need, and for women with publishing businesses to grow their businesses. That's really important to me. I am also an author. I'm under the pen name H.L. Brooks for my current paranormal series. I'm getting ready to re-release my first book because I had a lot of, I didn't have those moments like Lillian was talking about where I felt like I was full on proud of it. I was a little nervous about the fact I didn't have content warnings, which have become such a thing now. Wasn't so much of a thing when I first started. So I'm adding content warnings so I can feel more secure that the people opening my books know what they're getting themselves into, because there is some stuck content in there. So I write paranormal romance with some spicy bits in it, and it's based in a small town in Maryland in the 1980s. If you like 80s, it's called Red August is the first book, Red Archer and Red Hunter, and they are the shifters of Mohegan Falls series. And next book series that I'll have is a witchy cozy mystery with an ambiguously middle-aged plus size witch. She's curvy and sassy, and I like to think of the series as Bewitched meets Murder, She Wrote. So, and it's set in a small town in Maryland in the 70s. So that's kind of what I write. I hope to write a memoir at some point. You can find me in the group. You can find me on social media at HL Brooks Writes. You can also find the Write Book Fest on Instagram. If you just go to my website, to the link section, I have everything linked there to all of the groups, all of the things. I would also ask people to please buy a ticket, encourage friends to buy a ticket to the Write Women Book Fest this year. It's the first year we're charging tickets, so that we can, we've moved from an sort of a free outdoor venue of a smaller event, and now we've grown, so we're moving to an indoor venue, which has a lot of costs associated with it. We are hoping to that our 5th year is going to set the tone for the next 5-10 years. So hopefully the tickets are only $29. There'll be 100 women authors there, many of them independent published, some traditionally published. There will also be live poetry reading, and there will be panel discussions by some fairly well some TikTok authors and romance authors, where you're going to have some fantasy discussions and romance discussions and all that kind of thing. So I would like to close out with thanking Lilian again. Please look for her information. Oh, thank you so much, Pamela. Thank you, everybody. Please go to the links here. When I post this on YouTube, which will take me a week or so to do, I will also include all of Lilian's links. If you can find her through the Salon group. If you find her through the Salon group, I always encourage people to please go immediately follow. If once we get off of this, please go immediately follow people on social media so you don't have to remember to do it. Just take a minute, go back to the event page for this. Just go right to the Facebook and find Lilian Sue's page. In Retrospect Writing, I think is her Facebook page, isn't it? And yeah, okay. And then follow her on Insta if that's your favorite place, and just make sure that you follow and like and share so that we all can just keep climbing that ladder of success together. In closing, Lilian, did you have anything you'd like to say?
I appreciate you having me today, Heather, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone about imposter syndrome and about PR. I've posted my links in the chat as well. As Heather said, I'm also a part of the Write Women Network Facebook group, so you can always tag me on there if you want to chat. I've also posted the link to my current book campaign for my PR book. This one is the first nonfiction book that I'm releasing. I'm also working on my first adult contemporary romance with what looks to be another 4 or 5 ideas to come on the romance side, as well as a crime thriller idea as well. So in terms of the writing side of it and getting it out there and sharing your story, and I am right there with you on the mindset side of things. So I completely get it. And whenever you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. And also, with my book campaign as well, with the PR book in particular, that's one that I'm really, really focusing on the mindset piece. So that's something that, if you have questions about that or about goal planning or about building a strategy, that's something that this book will cover. So please do check it out.
Sounds fantastic. Yes, check out her crowdsource. I'm going to look up the YouTube because I don't remember it off the top of my head. Hang on. They wouldn't let me have the Write Women Network. Somebody already had like the initials I wanted or something. So I could, and plus at the time, I was still called, at the time I was trying to set it up, I was still called the Women Authors of Maryland, WHAM. But then when the pandemic hit, we expanded the virtual. So let me see, let's see, my channel is, I call it Stardust, but there's lots of channels called Stardust. So I've got a number at the end of mine. Let me just drop it in here. There you go. And I'll put it in the group as soon as we get off here. I'll just drop a link to our YouTube. It's got lots of, it's got various things. It's got book festival stuff. It's got salon stuff. It's got my daughter's music on there. I mean, it's got a variety of things, channels within it. But anything that we've done in this group is also on there. And this will also be on there after, if you want to go back and just listen to it for inspiration, or check for Lilian Sue's links and stuff like that. It'll all be there. Okay. Thank you everybody so much for participating. We appreciate you, and I will talk to you later. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Lilian. Lilian, you can stay on so we can depart from each other. If you'll just wait a second while everybody else leaves. And I'm going to stop recording.